video, a bit of a review with a difference, because this Citroen 2CV is my own car, and I think it's been many years since I really talked about what it is I love about these cars and the history of the 2CV. If you look back on my channel, there are so many videos featuring this car. We've rebuilt it, we've engine swapped, we've built engines, so much stuff. We've been to Croatia, we have been all over the place, so we've had many adventures. But yeah, I don't think I've really covered the history of this car with me, and also the Citroen 2CV as a wider whole. If you do look back on the channel to 2020, I think it is, I published a video testing an early 2CV, a ripple bonnet, British built 2CV that I found in Tasmania, Australia. So this is a very different animal, despite looking quite similar on the outside. So what are the differences, and what is the history of this French peasant wagon? So this is what the 2CV could have looked like. This is the Tout Petit Voiture of the late 1930s. Very simple design, even by 2CV standards, and shock horror, a water-cooled engine. Very different indeed to what the eventual production car would be like. In fact, they even experimented with a lawnmower type pull, but this lady is demonstrating an actual starting handle. But you can see the chassis underneath, and there's a lot of aluminium in the construction of these vehicles. Here's several surviving cars that were hidden away from the Nazis and hidden in a shed at La Ferté-Vidame for a very long time. Single wiper, I'm just picking up on there, water-cooled engine, and very different styling. A lot more in the way of exotic features in these early Tout Petit Voitures. So yes, it could have all been so very different. So it's horrible to think of the Second World War having any positive effect, but it really did on the 2CV, because development continued in secret during the Second World War. Walter Becchio came in and he designed a brand new air-cooled little engine, even more simple, and no belts or anything. The dynamo was all part of the crank pulley where the cooling fan fitted. Super simple. The bodywork was simplified as well. Steel was chosen because aluminium had become very scarce because of all the aeroplane manufacture going on. So a steel body was drawn up, and Firmino Bertoni, with an eye, designed a slightly more shapely body for the 2CV. Really quite a stylish one. This one still has much of that original design about it. One thing it doesn't have is a canvas boot lid. For simplicity, canvas all the way from here all the way to the front, so you got an opening roof so you could put large objects in the top. Canvas boot lid meant you could easily stick things out the back and drive along if you so had to. The original design brief famously said it should carry a basket of eggs across a ploughed field and not break one. It was meant to do 100 mpg as well. They didn't quite get there, but those early cars could get around 50 or 60. Very impressive, although that's because they had 9 brake horsepower. Yeah, 375cc engine, very small. And the other thing it had to do was seat 4 people comfortably, and the driver must be able to wear a top hat, which is why we have quite so much headroom in the Citroen 2CV. So the real masterstroke of this car was that little flat twin engine. Very simple to maintain, very easy to look after, and very robust as well. It powered through a 4-speed gearbox to the front wheels. Becchio was insistent that it had a 4-speed gearbox, but Pierre Boulanger, the boss of Citroen at the time under Michelin, was like, no, it can't have 4 gears because the traction Avant has only 3. But this little engine needed every little bit of help it could get, and Becchio carefully decided to say, oh, well, it isn't a 4th gear, it's an overdrive, which is why early 2CVs have an S for whatever the French for overdrive is. I'm afraid it has slipped my mind for the moment. But very clever making it front wheel drive, because that meant the floor of the cabin could be completely flat. There is no intrusion at all. There are horizontal springs under the floors that do all the springing. That was another development, a complete change from the torsion bars of Tout Petit Voiture, and that gave it much more flexibility. But because the springs are under the floor, the massive amount of travel means there is no intrusion into the passenger area. It is an absolute masterstroke. Now we need to start jumping into some of the details here, because this engine is not related to those early 2CVs. This is what's known as an M28 engine, which was developed in the late 1960s, a much improved, even more robust design. which was necessary because auto routes were now a thing. People wanted to travel distance in their Citroen 2CVs. So this cracking little engine was now producing about 29 brake horsepower, but would happily run at motorway speeds all day, even though that was pretty much flat out. Top speed was now 70 miles an hour, up from the 43 miles an hour of the originals, if you got a flat bit of road, slight bit of hill, and they were utterly done for. This one also has disc brakes, which were introduced in 1981. First seen on the Ami in the early 1970s. Disc brakes offered much stronger stopping power. So the disc drum setup means this car stops really very nicely indeed. And a further curiosity is the brake system uses LHM. That's the lifeblood of the later Citroen DS's and the hydraulic Citroens all the way up to the Xantia. And it's not hydroscopic, it doesn't absorb water, which means its service life is much longer, and it tends not to rot pipes out quite so quickly. And another brilliant bit of engineering, there is no steel in the calipers, so the pistons are alloy, so there's no corrosion. You do not often get sticky brake components on these cars. They really were a lot more engineered than people give them credit for. Another thing they all had from the very start is rack and pinion steering, which was pretty unheard of in the early 1940s, especially on a cheap car. And that meant the 2CV actually tracked really nicely down the road. Centre point steering, again, meant the handling was superb, despite skinny little wheels. Those first 2CVs had 16-inch wheels. This later one is on 15s. Incidentally, Ellie is wearing her winter scarf because it's quite cold today. A muff, an essential part of the 2CV's kit. This car contains many parts that are not related to a 2CV from the factory. The front bumper was made by Louis Barber, who makes the four-wheel drive 2CV conversions on the aftermarket. The roof is also non-standard. That is a custom item by Matt Softtops, who makes lots of 2CV roofs and the Dianes, etc. And he can do little screens inside, sunscreens, and he did also make this grille muff on the front. More changes from stock. My 2CV is a dolly, and the dolly should have little hubcaps. I don't like them. It should have chrome sill strips. I don't like those either. They just allow rot to creep in. And it should have side stripes. I'll refit them one day, he says. At the rear of my 2CV is an adventure bar. You could get an adventure kit from Citroen. I believe this is an aftermarket one though. And that included cutaway wings, handles on the back. So you had all the looks to go rally raiding. That was something Citroen often financed, was incredible trips abroad overseas through deserts and mountains for 2CVs so they could go, look what our cars can do. Remarkably tough little cars. I can give you a little suspension demonstration as well. Just look how much there is. That is a lot of suspension. There's also free play in the drive shaft. The handbrake is on the discs, inboard discs, and that means there's a little bit of slop in the handbrake. That means you can move a 2CV back and forth this much just on the splines of the drive shaft. That movement exaggerated. So yeah, they are entertaining vehicles. Let's have a jump inside. Now the doors on a 2CV seem terrifyingly slender, but that's all about getting maximum interior space for the given width. They are very narrow. A Diane is considerably wider, much more room for your elbows. But there's a trick of the 2CV I really need to show you, and that's this. The doors come off in no time at all. Originally the front doors came off the same way as well, but they were suicide doors, rear hinge, and people didn't like that, so they fitted conventional hinges. The bonnet and the boot lid use the same sliding hinge, it's slightly rusty folks, technique. So you can strip a 2CV in no time at all. There we go. Door back on. We shall start in the back, where if I just move my coat for a moment, we can hop in. Oh, it's a bit of a squeeze and you really have to watch your head on there, but there's a reasonable amount of room, pretty decent leg room even behind me, and I can kind of see over the driver's head because this back seat sits a little higher. You feel the body roll all the more back here as well. Moving to the front, you sit a little lower down, but it doesn't escape anyone's notice that I actually look out of the rear window quite a lot. You sit quite a long way back. Steering wheel is straight in front of me. pedals, weirdly, ideally set out for heel and toe, but that turns out to be a good thing. First gear synchromesh does not exist, so you have to double declutch if you want to get first gear on the move. I've done a separate video about double declutching that you can check out. Now, I'm afraid my seat does creak and groan a bit, and so does the suspension. I think I need to lubricate my suspension cans. But again, we're a little away from the norm here. This shouldn't be red and white. It shouldn't be quite so dusty either. This should be grey with the gear pattern shown there. I customised that some time ago. This one has the 2-spoke steering wheel. You could also get a 1-spoke fitted to the Charleston and other models. Moving down, here are the pedals. My pedal pad is a little worn there, might have to replace that. But like I say, the pedals easily set, so when you're braking you can manipulate the throttle for a bit of double declutching action. Got a control here for the choke, and this one adjusts the height of the headlamps, so you can adjust them to suit. I'll get to what that is in a moment, but associated rubbish. The headlamp stalk here, that's dip beam. That is also dip beam, but if I'm in veal and I pull up, the side lights come on, and if I'm in route and I pull up, the main beam comes on. I've got a little warning just about visible there. These were never fitted to UK cars for some reason. Very, very odd. And there's an exemption in the MOT manual for the lack of a main beam warning light. Very peculiar. I've got a push for the windscreen washers here, which squirts like so. Other buttons, we've got the wiper here, but if I just push it gently, you get a single wipe. It has a mist function built into the button, and then that's permanently on. As you can see, there's actually a hint of a triangle of doom on this car because of the way the wipers are set, but you got this corner here of disappointment, a bit of a chunk in the middle of the screen, and a little disappointment over that corner as well. That is not the best wiping performance. And an interesting tidbit, all UK 2CVs from about 79, I think, had the wipers. They used straight wiper arms, and they actually parked over here. But a lot of Brits found the wipers parking in front of them was a pain, so they changed it to left hand. I've actually got left hand drive wiper arms on mine. That's interesting, isn't it? I've also added this little USB charger, and it actually tells me the state of the battery charge as well. 12.8 resting voltage. Other buttons we've got here, we better cover the hazards. Lovely little noise. This button makes that light down there come on. I've actually switched these over because that one's oil pressure, and this one, if that one comes on while you're driving along, oh, broken a fingernail, that's your brake fluid is low. But I decided that actually my engine is more important. And then we've got the fog light switch over here. There we go. So single fog light. This is the indicator stalk, which has a nasty habit of just falling off, which is really helpful. It just sort of fits into a little slide fitting there, and it looks very flimsy, and it is, to be fair. And then next to the indicator stalk, perilously close, is the gear lever. Now this causes a lot of fear in people, but I'll show you how simple this is. At the moment we're in neutral, so you see where that thing is in relation to that. That tells me I'm in neutral. If I twist round and pull out, I'm in first gear. If I push and just let it bounce back into that gate and let it continue, we're now in second gear. Straight back out, third gear, no fault at all. And then if I just twist that way and push in, we're now in fourth gear. Really very, very simple. A reverse is there opposite first. It's an absolute doddle. It's a lovely action. Most of your time you're going to be buzzing between second and third, and look at that action. Marvellous, beautiful. Handbrake is down here. If I just put the foot brake on for a moment, it's just an umbrella handle. It just slides out like so. Ventilation, there is a little flap under there that I can open and close with this control down here, and quite often water leaks in there. That's your door handle, that's your pull closed, and that's the window. Oh yes, windows. So this is the release clip. So you push that clip and the window is released, and then the window goes up, and there's a little clip up here that I clip the window into. It should just force its way in, and there we go, it's locked in place, it can't fall down, which means when you're driving along and want to close the window, you've got to go outside and find where this clip is. Earlier cars just had a rubber bung, but when that rubber degrades, the window just falls down and bangs you on the elbow when you're driving along like this, which is your typical Parisian pose. So that's not good at all. But this clever little device is a system that allows you to have the window half open. So if I now lower the window, it will only close that far. So I get a bit of ventilation, but it keeps most of the rain off. And it's adjustable too. Look at this. It could be just down there. Otherwise, you drive along with the window flapping in the breeze, which gets a bit irritating. So these little rubber things, available from places like ECAS 2CV parts, I believe, sort it right out. Right, I was going to see what the magic is all about. Just do that. Now, that is my neutral check. It just becomes a force of habit now. And I will say another quick trick. If you're fairly new to 2CV, or generally any car that has no first gear synchro mesh, say I'm in third gear as I come to a stop at a junction. If I want to select first gear, just go into seconds, stops the gearbox, and then out into first once you come to a halt. It does save a crunch. But let's turn the key. So Ellie is back on a 602cc engine again. I did go 652 for a time. Had a few issues with that engine, but I don't think it was a 652 kit's fault. But this is a fairly low mileage engine. In stark contrast to the car itself, Ellie has done 222,900 miles from new. And I bought this car with 89,500 miles on it. So I've done quite a lot of those miles myself. But yeah, let's go for a drive. We'll start by going backwards because we appear to be pointed at a tree. Be very careful in reverse. You can unwind the 2CV gearbox. There's a nut that should be peened on the back of it and often isn't on the 80s ones unless a specialist has done the job for you. But first gear, away we go. And you can go very slowly. That is tick over in first gear. No clutch, and away we go. Now, being an air-cooled engine, it is a little noisy, perhaps, but all very much part of the 2CV's charm. This engine in particular seems a real peach. It's a very quiet engine for a 2CV one. They all tend to have their own character. Here's an interesting section of road. This is very Wales. The farmer has put this across the road, this pipe here, so we've got to go over this ramp. There we go, good test for the suspension. Into third, into fourth. Lovely gearbox. You can do really quick changes, which you need because there's very little torque, so you have to keep the engine on boil somewhat. I think we'll go this way. There aren't many cars where you can indicate whilst changing gear, but this is one of them. We have got gravity on our side, but that's 40, 50. And that's 60 miles an hour. Obviously the wind noise is building up because we've got the roof off, so there's a fair bit of wind around. But yeah, that's 60 miles an hour. You'll comfortably sit at this pace all day. Not an issue at all. It's only an issue for your ears, but if you buy a Hubnut beanie hat, you can pull it down over your ears and it makes things a bit quieter. The doors do flap a bit at motorway speeds. You can often see a bit of air around them. That's normal. That's not a problem at all. Yeah, few cars offer so much fun for so little power. And you know, you can rev them like crazy and they will just put up with it. And that's one of the things I love about these cars. Here we are, we're now doing 40 miles an hour. It's still in top gear. And progress is a lot more peaceful, a lot more pleasant. And yeah, I just love these cars to bits. They feel so eager and they are so much fun. Obviously you've got the famous body roll. We'll be able to demonstrate that fairly soon, I think. If I give it a bit more angle that way, perhaps you will see the body roll a bit more. And yeah, that's just part of the fun. But the ride is so comfortable and compliant because the travel is so very, very long, very generous. Which is why you need the headlamp adjuster, because if you've got people in the back, your headlights are pointing at the sky, so you need to be able to lower them. Downshift for the hill because there is no torque. Yeah, it's just absolutely one of my favourite cars to drive. The steering is just lovely. On a windy day you get flung all over the road, so you really have to pay attention. But on a dry, quiet day like this, it's just an absolute delight. And you see people smiling at you all the time. When I first got a 2CV, they were a joke car. People would actually point and laugh. But these days, people are just pleased to see something that looks so very different. You know, the 2CV is one of the most iconic cars of all time, I think. Germany has the Beetle, America has the Model T, France very much has the 2CV, Italy the Fiat 500 Nuova, and perhaps the Morris Minor is one of the more iconic British cars out there. All people's cars, what does that tell you? None of them are Lamborghinis. Oh, just lovely. Driving down into the sea as we approach Aberon. Give the brakes a good shove. Yeah, and she kind of stands on her nose. The brakes are sublime. And that is one of the key differences. I drove the Austin 7 recently. That was terrifying because I didn't always feel I could stop in the distance I could see. A 2CV stops really well. You do have to learn to cadence brake because the brakes will easily outdo the grip the tyres can offer. So you have to manually ABS sometimes and, you know, really manipulate the lockup point. But yeah, just a joy to drive. But as you can see, a very well-mannered car as well at slower speeds. I'm in third gear, doing 20 miles an hour at this point. It just potters along. Gonna have a potter around here. Let's see how much body roll I can get on this corner. Oh yeah, substantial. Very much part of the package and part of the fun of the Citroen 2CV. Yeah, slow or fast, a 2CV is a huge amount of fun, which proves that power, less really is more. Well, there we go. Hopefully I've managed to get across some of the enjoyment I get from these remarkable little cars. I've owned this one for 22 years, but I've had 2CVs in total since I was 18 years old, way back in 1996. And I couldn't be without one, in truth. They are so much fun, and you just feel so much of the sensation of driving one, but at the same time, they drive straight and true, they handle hilariously well, and they stop, importantly, a lot better than some cars, and a lot better than you probably expect. And yeah, so many adventures, and hopefully many more to come. So stay tuned to Hubnut for more adventures of Ellie the 2CV. We've got hopefully some plans to get her on the continent again next year, and I'll see you in a future video. Farewell.